Right. Shotgun? Check. Smoke grenades? Check. Rabid My Little Pony repellent? Double check. It's the 5 games for Doomsday Expeditions. So, this is a series of interviews that I'm going to do with people who've been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. Some will come out before the awards, and one at least, but maybe more, will come out after the awards. Usually, I get the opportunity to go to the ceremony, drink in the atmosphere, and find out what's sort of going on. But unfortunately, due to this shitty virus, we're not going to be able to do that this year. So I'm going to try and collect as many of the nominees as I can. For sure, some people will be left out, but fingers crossed it'll be as comprehensive as it can. Sit back, enjoy, and hopefully next year we'll be able to do the thing live. So I'm here with the designer of My City and serial Spiel des Jahres nominee, Reiner Knizia. So firstly, referring to that, you've been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres a number of times, and you've also won it. Does there come a time in which being nominated for the most prestigious board game award in the world becomes boring, or is it really exciting every time?
No, it certainly does not become boring. It is exciting every time. It's actually, for my taste, sometimes too exciting and too emotional, because in the end, I know very well that once the nominations are up, I cannot influence it anymore. I can influence things much further ahead when I design games, and that's where I like to try my energy. And then I'm trying to keep my nerves smooth when the whole process starts. But it is always exciting again. It is always, of course, a big honor to be nominated.
And I can see behind you, you have your trophy cabinets. And I can see 2 Spiel des Jahres Puppe. That's the trophies that you win for the Spiel des Jahres. And so what do you think it is about your designs, your games, that so appeal to the Spiel des Jahres jury that you keep getting nominated? So in the last 5 years, I guess you've been nominated 3 times, right?
I think each designer has their own handwriting. I'm a scientist by nature, and so I'm trying to reduce the world or the game to very simple principles, but then to kind of establish the game as a platform where people can interact with each other and can get their emotions and their different preferences into the game. So I think that opens the door to a lot of people because the rules are short. The hurdles to get into the game are very small, but then there is at least I try. There's a lot of fun and there's a lot of interaction in the game, and the players can really influence the game. And when you play with different players, the game is slightly different. So the game is nothing absolute. I'm just trying to kind of create a stage where people can have a good time together.
And so what I've noticed about your games, and I'm really sort of discovering that I spent the last 2 years sort of going back and playing a lot of your sort of older games. One of my recent favourites that I'm absolutely blown away by is Stevenson's Rocket, for instance. And there seems to be a great depth to simplicity ratio in that the games rules-wise are quite simple, but then the depth of play comes through, and especially with the interaction between players. Is this something you aim for, or is this just your sort of natural design inclination?
Oh, that is absolutely something that I aim for. I'm not the greatest storyteller with all the different details, which are then transformed into the game in lots of different rules, where you say, oh, this is very thematic, and every little thing has a different rule, and everything has a little event card and event token and so on, and you have a big administration in the game to handle everything. This is not quite my style. My style is, as you say, to keep it simple from the materials, simple from the rules, but have very clearly condensed the game to its core essentials, and therefore you can really enjoy yourself when playing it. All the unnecessary things which distract you are away, and you are in there in the theme. You are set up against your players if you're not playing cooperatively, and it's really the game for you to enjoy. That's really what I want to bring down to the point. Everything of course, we test a lot, and when we test it, we always look how can we reduce it? What is really necessary to it? So we don't want to make it too simple, but we want to leave things away which do not really contribute to the enjoyment.
And as I said, you've been nominated now for the Spiel des Jahres, I think in the last five or 6 years, 3 times. You know, there was El Dorado, Llama, and now My City. Do you feel like you're having something of a renaissance in the sort of regard for your designs, or do you feel that you kind of never went away?
That is very difficult for me to judge. I think there's a good saying, you make your own luck. So that means I'm working hard, and I'm really putting in a lot of energy into staying relevant and seeing what is relevant for today's players, which is different than 10 years ago. So I'm trying not to rest on my laurels, if I may say so. But you make your own luck, but you still need the luck. So sometimes you're lucky and you get nominated. And this is with all due respect. I mean, you need a little bit of luck. There is always a matter of taste within the different games. And there are always more than 3 games which are certainly deserving to be nominated. And there is certainly more than 1 game which deserves to win. And so there needs to be a selection taken, and somebody wins. And in a way, yes, it's a great honor to be nominated. It's an even greater honor to win. But in the end, for the culture of the gaming and what the awards are really for, it is actually not so relevant which one wins, because there are certainly a handful of games. Each deserves to win, each delivering what a winner should deliver. And so it's more, we have a winner and this one gets into the limelight, and this one will carry, so to speak, the torch to reach many people and therefore make gaming exciting and bring it to many people. If it's game A, game B, game C, or My City, it's not so relevant for the general public. It's very relevant for me, of course.
And so going on to My City then. So My City is a legacy game. It's a game that has permanent different states. And now I may be wrong, this might not be the first one you've designed, but this is the first one that's come into my purview, a legacy game that you designed. What is the difference between designing, for want of a better term, a standard board game and a legacy game? How much more difficult is the development?
This was actually, or this is, My City is my first legacy game, and it was very deliberately developed as a legacy game. My ambition here, and that's a bit in the line of keeping it simple, opening the door to lots of people. So the clear ambition with My City is to keep the rules so simple that the general public can play the game, but that it's still exciting for the gamers to also experience this game. So that was the extra challenge, rather than just doing, I say, another legacy game. And that's meant with the greatest respect again. So that was the ambition. But your question was, what's the challenge there? My City goes over 24 games, and they are structured into 8 chapters through the history of a city, which everybody is building in front of him or her, and which changes from age to age, from game to game, as a legacy game does. And of course, if I cut down the woods this time, I won't have the woods next time because I've already cut them down. And so it's a little bit of a dilemma. How much do I do this time? What is going to come next time? The testing of the legacy games is, of course, much more involving, because you cannot just change game 5 in isolation, because this may of course, have consequences for game 6, game 7, game 8. But of course, it also has consequences for game 2, maybe, because if I know that something is different in game 5, I may want to play differently. Of course, the players, when they play through the sequence of the games, will not even know what is in game 5. But nevertheless, the dynamics of the game needs to work. And therefore, to really optimize the flow and also make sure that nobody can get on the wrong track by, so to speak, natural ignorance, because you don't know what is coming. So you give the people the freedom to decide, but you also guide them a little bit so that just out of not knowing what the future brings, don't go in the wrong direction. And then 2-3 games later, find out, oh, just out of accident, I went in the wrong direction, and now it looks very badly, and all these things. So we need to avoid this. So it's a lot of testing. And that was actually, usually, I mean, we almost play every day, but usually we end our play sessions in the evening at 10 o'clock. Every decent person has to get up next morning. They're not game designers and go to work. And so I noticed that we have something special because the guys were still, or not only guys, so both sexes. People were hanging around until midnight and saying, okay, just one more. That's a very good indication. Of course, it's very difficult to play through a legacy game in one go. So we actually did spend some weekends where we just played from game 1 to game 24. And again, each game only takes 20 minutes, but then setting up, discussing it and so on. So the weekend was really filled. But again, people never tired of it. So it was just seeing the dynamics. And of course, you play through and say, what if you change this, if you change that? And then you do all the changes, and then you start it again and say, okay, let's try it again. How does it work? So this is the iterative process where you meander along and try to get closer to the perfect game. I think in modern terms, they call it now design thinking. It is common sense.
And so this is a legacy game, but it's also a Reiner Knizia game. What do you bring? What is it about your design ethos, your design sort of idea that you bring to this particular genre? Why is My City unique in this?
I'll give a little bit of a wider answer here. Of course, every designer has the ambition to create something new. And with this respect, I'm very ambitious. And if I could, I would like to design and make all the new trends. This is overambitious, and I realize that other people are excellent designers, and I cannot make all the trends. So the second thing I then can do is I just don't want to trample along and do a Me Too game in the different genres. So 2 years ago, when El Dorado came out, the objective was very clear. Somebody else has invented a deck building game. And I thought, this is a marvelous idea, but when I played a deck building game for the first time, and that was Dominion, this is the archetype of it, the first one, I actually, even though I believe I'm an experienced player, had difficulties to get into that game mechanics because it seemed to be an abstract engine which we are building. And so my ambition, again, was for El Dorado to say, can I not open the door? Can I not make it very intuitive? Can I not, so to speak, engage lots of people who might not have taken the hurdle so far for a deck building game to get into that? And so clearly, I mean, not clearly, when in hindsight it's clear. So we got the board in there, and so I go through the jungle, and it's quite clear I need a machete, I may need a jeep, and so on to get through. And then comes the river. Okay, my machete doesn't help me getting over the river, so I need a boat or something. So it's quite clear that I need some new cards which allow me to cross the river. And after the river, there comes the desert. And why am I still carrying the boat on my back through the desert? So I want to get rid of the card again. And so it is quite naturally through this race along the different terrains that I need to adjust my deck. And that becomes so natural, so intuitive that people know what they're doing. And then the rest flows naturally. So now coming back to My City. Again, the ambition here is that players do not need to read very long rules to get into the game. You start with a simple 20 minutes game where you have certain buildings and you have a little board in front of you, and you want to place the buildings most cunningly, most effectively onto the board. There's a river in the middle. Clearly, you can't build the buildings over the river. And there is woods, and initially you can't go into the woods, and there are mountains, and you can't build in the mountains. And we have the challenge that we know which buildings we have, but in which order we build the buildings is not clear. And once we start somewhere, the others need to always be adjacent and need to grow from where we started the initial settlement. So we turn up the cards which are shuffled and which then show us the first building. And everybody takes their building, this exact building, a factory, might be a church, whatever it is, and you build it. And then you build the next one. And there are 2 or 3 simple scoring rules, what you want to achieve. Build clusters, build something there, and so on. And this is all you do. I have essentially explained the rules to you. There's a little score sheet on the side, and you can just see these are the 3-4 things which are important for me this game, and you can start. And then you have played the first game and say, oh, okay, I understand. And then there's a little extra rule coming the second game, that you try to get lots of factories together. And so you play the second game, and then you play the third game with some extra rules and say, okay, now I understood it. And then you open the next envelope, and then suddenly some extra buildings come in, the big cathedral, which needs quite some space, which you need to plan for. So a little bit more challenging, but of course you're now experienced already. So I take the player, I take you step by step through this city building. And also you don't have to fear when you play game 16 or game 24 at the end, that you have an enormously overwhelming conglomerate of rules. Because as we move on, the old rules fall by the wayside, and it's always only 3-4 rules which you have to look after. They're a bit more challenging, yes, because you're an experienced builder now, but it's always very clear to keep in sight what you want to do and how you try to be better than your rivals, even though you're all playing from the same deck of cards and in the same order. So how do you do that better? And how do you, in the end, come out as a winner? I actually think who wins after 24 games does really not matter at all, because there is the enjoyment of trying things out. And the nice thing is, if one game goes wrong because you just put it in the wrong side, or luck worked against you if you want it this way, or you played stupidly if you're honest, then 20 minutes is over, and then you try another one, and then you can try to win again. And now I know better, and I now know I see how you did it. That's much smarter. So, and that's all that happens there. So, to say it in one sentence, I think what is the innovative part and the new part, again, is my philosophy that it is very simple to get into the game. You have a lot of excitement within 20 minutes. And you certainly, after 20 minutes, haven't got enough, and you want to play the next one, and the next one, and the effort of playing another 20-minute game is very simple.
And so, coming back to the Spiel des Jahres, you're an established name in the board game industry. You've been around for a while. Are you surprised that the Spiel des Jahres is no longer a simply German concern, that there's international interest, that everyone around the world who's into games cares who wins?
No, I'm not surprised, because this is, I think, a natural consequence of our globalization, of the games becoming really international, and also about the communication, the internet. I mean, if you go back 20, 30 years, there was no real internet. People didn't even have, I think I got my email in the year 2000. 20 years ago, yes. So think 30 years ago, when I did my tile-laying games, my classic games, there was no real internet. I mean, I had my books there, I still have them, where I read about Tigris and Euphrates and Mesopotamia, and I had my stamps where I illustrated, there was no desktop publishing, where I illustrated my cards and so on. So it was a different world. And so clearly then the markets were much more local. Today, if I need to know something about my games, I have a big library of my games. I don't go in the library. I go on my screen and look on Board Game Geek usually, and then find the information about what I have next door. Yes, So it's a very different world. And of course, also because the market is quite competitive. So when you put such a lot of effort into designing a perfect game, then why would you only sell it in your own community, in your little village? You want to sell it in your country, you want to sell it in the world. But very few publishers are actually set up to be global players. And so they have a lot of cooperations and co-productions and a real network. If one publisher does it, the others pick it up. And of course, that globalizes the interest. So it's not only one publisher hoping for the big success, it's many publishers who carry the game.
And so finally then, how would it feel if we're recording this on the 16th of July, Monday the 20th is the ceremony. How would you feel if, when they whip the sheet away from the podium, that my city is standing on top of the podium?
I would be standing on top of the world. Of course, it is a great success and it is something fabulous, and you have the chance only once a year maximum if you're nominated, and some years you don't have the chance, and it's a big opportunity, and it's yes, it is something to really, really celebrate and to be happy about, and it's certainly one of the highlights of the year then, the game of the year. On the other hand, you have to say all three nominees have deserved to win, and only one can win. And so you cannot make your inner happiness, so to speak, dependent on the awards. It's nice to win, but the higher you get on the winning, the more down you might get on not winning. So I want to see that in proportion. It's a great honor. It's fantastic because the game would see a much bigger audience, and that is actually what drives me to bring the enjoyment to many people. But it is also to stay humble enough and say, you win some and you lose some, and in the end, luckily, it's not for me to decide.
Excellent. Well, I'm saying this to everyone, so I'm not picking you out specifically, but best of luck, and good luck for Monday, and we'll see who wins. So, Reiner Knizia, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
You can support the show by going to patreon.com/5G4D.